Hey guys, what's up and welcome back. This is our kitchen currently, and today we're going to be doing some epoxy countertops using the Legarri products. Just to kind of get you up to date here, what we've done so far is we have sprayed the cabinets with a spray gun, painted them that way, and we've put all new appliances in here. And the next thing that we're going to do is go ahead and we're going to remove the sink. I want to kind of walk you through that process a little bit. And we're going to sand the countertops. And then we're going to primer the countertops. And then we're going to go ahead and do our epoxy. Oh, I also did a bunch of individual subway tile. Didn't do a video on it. This is really like my first official anything related to our home video. But stay tuned and we're going to make this thing look like glass. All right, so first things first, we've cleaned out from under the sink, and it was very easy to unhook this part. All I gotta do is spin that, and that side is already unhooked. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to leave this hooked up. This is the garbage disposal. I'm going to loosen it from there, and I think you can loosen it from there anyways. We'll see. And then we'll go and take all of these screws out. That's what holds the sink in. And then we need to unhook the water connections, which are right there. Okay, so I've got everything unhooked. The easiest way to get these out without having to spend a whole lot of time in this very nasty smelling space is this contraption here. Just put on a drill, extensions, one of those adapters, and then the size for the socket, and that was fairly quick and easy. The garbage disposal, if you have one that looks like this, or maybe they all do, I'm not sure, but it just spun off of this bracket, lefty-loosey. And then of course your main water connections back here, very easy to remove. All the plastic connections I just removed by hand. Now the sink is ready to come out. All right, we've got the sink out, just lifted straight out. This one was not siliconed, as you can see, and it actually has left some nastiness and began to start rotting this. So we're actually going to replace our sink because we don't like it. It's very shallow. Replace it with a new sink, and then we're going to, whenever we put the new one in, we're going to silicone it so that this does not happen again. All right, so what we've done now is just ran some masking tape around everything, all the perimeters, and do this very carefully because say if you mess up this line right here, you're going to have epoxy on your wall, or your cabinet, I mean, and just be very careful with it and mask off everything. And everything below the tape is going to have drop cloth. So put drop cloth, all here, all the way around. We remove the stove, that way there's no chance of it getting on the stove, and plus we can get these inside pieces here. Pay no attention to that, it's very dirty. And then for the dishwasher, I don't want to unhook it, so what we're going to do with it is just, I've masked it off like this. I'll scoot it in just a little bit, about like that, and then I'm going to drop cloth around it, just like I would everything else. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to sand the entire countertop with 80 grit, and they say to do like 320. I think 80 grit is plenty sufficient because that epoxy is so thick that you won't see any scratches that the 80 grit would leave in it. So personally, I think it's a waste of time. Now the first time that we did this, we went all the way to 320, and there was really no reason to, so we're just going to do 80 grit only. And then we're going to move on to primering it. Now, whenever you are working on this, make sure you choose a good brand. The first time we did it at our other house, our first home that we bought, we used Stone Coat Countertop epoxy, and our whole...
I'd rather kill myself.
Yeah, so Stone Coat Countertop epoxy is probably the worst epoxy that you could possibly buy.
And customer service that you could ever ask for.
And yeah, the customer service was absolutely awful. It also takes over 30 days to cure.
And it doesn't even cure.
And ours never cured. So anytime we laid something on it, a piece of mail, the mail would stick to it, and then we would have to scrape it off, and it was just an awful time. So this time we went with Legarri. I do have high hopes that this is going to be way, way better. Also, the Stone Coat Countertop people, I had told them, well, also they knew because of my order, that I had a black base. And then they advised me to use a white primer. And I questioned it like 3 or 4 times, and I was like, okay, whatever, I'll just do what you all say. Obviously, you're the professionals, right? And so obviously I should not have used a white primer with a black base. You want to use the same color primer as your base. So if you're going with a white base like I am, we're using a white primer. If you're going with a black base, I would use a black primer. That way, whenever it goes over the edges and it's thin, you won't be able to tell. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and sand this, and then we can put the mask, the drop cloth up, and then we can go ahead and start primering, and then we can go ahead and pour. Okay, so I should mention this. If you have any chips or cracks or defects or anything in your countertop, you can actually just use Bondo. That's what I did. We had a chip here and a chip here, so I'll have Bondoed that. And then we're going to sand it with some 80 grit, obviously, to smooth it back out. There's that. And then, so where your countertops meet and it creates a crease, if you don't want to see that crease through the epoxy, you're going to have to Bondo it, or use any form of, filler that you prefer. So this is what I prefer. It's easy to work with, and I'm used to it since I'm, like a car guy. So that's what I did, and then we'll sand it down to 80 grit so that you cannot see that seam. All right, so we do have the Bondo and sanding done. To give you an idea of how it, should look, this is where and the shape of the chip that was out of it, and right here. So, you can't feel any difference at all. So you shouldn't be able to tell that at all, but that's where that part was. And then the highs and low spots, really this was the worst place. But all of it should pretty well be sanded off. But you can see this was a high spot, that's why it's sanded down so far, and this was a low spot, that's why you can still see Bondo. And then we did it here also, and then back there also. Just be aware that it is a ton of dust, and you're going to have dust literally everywhere. Now I'm going to put some more tape up through here, and then do the masking down here, and then we can primer. Here's what everything looks like masked up, and as you can see, it's kind of like covering the floor. For painting, you're not really going to need that, but once you start pouring the epoxy, or for the primer, you won't need that. But for when you start pouring the epoxy, you're definitely going to want that on the floor so that it's not dripping all over your floor. And we have an air vent under there, so as you can see, it's just kind of blowing it out anyways. When you are cleaning and about ready to do your primer, I'm just cleaning with 91% alcohol and some clean shop towels. So this is the primer. You mix these two together, and then after these two are mixed together, you put some water in there, 2 ounces or so, whatever it says there. And then these are our metallic colors that we chose. We went with bronze and black. And then this is our base coat. We just went with a white base, so we're doing a white primer. Going to mix the white primer, and then we can go ahead and apply it. So I don't know if this is worth noting or not, but this said it was 7 ounces, and it was 6 ounces. And this said that it's 14 ounces and it was more like 11. No, not 11, 13. And this was in there in the part A mixture. And it's basically like a piece of clay. Pretty much no matter how hard I could have shook this up, because I shook it for a long time. But no matter how hard I could have shook this up, there's no way that would have ever mixed in. As far as the primer goes so far, this is 2 coats, and the primer is just terrible. I wish I would have just used my own primer, because basically anything would have been better than this primer. This is 2 coats and some terrible coverage. We're gonna let this dry again, and we're gonna put more coats on it, at least 3 coats, 4 if we have enough. But there's what it's looking like so far. And we'll come back after we get done with the primer. It's getting dark in here, so you really can't see that much. So this is this is 3 coats on the flat portion and 4 coats on the vertical surfaces like here and there. There wasn't enough to do 4 coats on all of it, and you can still see like marks and stuff since I didn't have enough to go ahead and do all of it. But I mean, it's probably good enough, I guess. But so here is us pouring the very first the white base coat. This is all the primer's dry, and we're just going to try to keep it in the middle. We're not going to go anywhere near the edges just yet. Just start just like this. Okay, so we've got the white laid down, and we're about to pour our first color. And as you can see, it's still leveling out, turning out pretty good. So I'm just going to be basically as random as possible with this. There's really no special correct way to do this. Just kind of make it flowy in one direction as if it was actually cut from a piece of marble. So a lot has changed since we did the last video. We put all the colors on, and you can kind of see it's like kind of like a marble style. I've tried like quite a few different ways to do it, and this is kind of the finished result here. Got a really glossy finish to it. I can already tell that this brand is going to be much better than Stone Coat, because I mean, Stone Coat was just awful to work with in every way possible. And this is not dripping nearly as much as the Stone Coat was. And this has no smell, and the Stone Coat smelled absolutely terrible. But this is kind of what we're working with here. Now this brand does say that you don't have to torch it to pop the air bubbles and to get, like, you know, the glossy finish. 'Cause, I mean, it looks like glass. But I would probably recommend it just so that you do get the best possible finish. I went over it with the torch and it did pop a lot of unseen air bubbles and smoothed out the finish quite a bit. Now the backsplash, I love the flat part of the countertop, but this vertical piece of the countertop, I'm not crazy about that, but a lot of that's going to be covered up just by everything that we have on our countertops. So I think it's going to turn out just fine. One thing that you do need to keep in mind is, you know, every 30 minutes or so, just kind of run your finger along the bottom edge of this or like a paint stick or something, just to get the drips off of there, and just continue doing that until it's completely dry, at least like touch dry. It'll probably be touch dry in maybe around 24 hours. But this is what we're working with. And we went and bought our new sink, so we're pretty excited to see how this turns out.